Who are the 5 most underrated US presidents in the history of America? I'm going to be answering that question. Now before we do so, I hope you guys subscribe to my channel, and I want you to comment who you think the most 5 underrated presidents are. At number 5, we have Grover Cleveland. The reason why Grover Cleveland is at number 5 is because he fought the patronage spoil system. Grover Cleveland was the first 2 non-consecutive terms, not like that's gonna improve his presidency and make him an underrated president. I feel like he's overshadowed by his successors, Willie McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt. And I also think he's overshadowed by the fact that he's a peacetime president. And peacetime presidents don't really get much love, but we should appreciate the peacetime presidents. Grover Cleveland did not support the annexation of Hawaii. He believed that overthrowing the monarchy in Hawaii was illegal and that the US should not interfere. And he also respected Native American rights, opposing the treaty in the Dakotas where white settlers wanted to break the treaty. And he was also known for his independence. I mean, he opposed the free coinage of silver, and Democrats heavily supported that. That literally shows how much of a moderate Democrat he was, that he prioritized in his own beliefs than that of his party's loyalty. This is why Grover Cleveland's at 5. And he also vetoed a bunch of bills that he believed that were overly generous, by the way, so yeah. At number 4, we have Andrew Johnson. I'm just kidding. We have Richard Nixon. Now, this is going to probably be the most controversial placement, but we will see at 1, and I will have to check the comments on that. Surprisingly, though, Richard Nixon actually desegregated schools faster than JFK and LBJ. And then he also ended the military draft. Yes, the bombings in Cambodia were seen as aggressive and angered the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Compared to what politicians do today, Richard Nixon and Watergate looks minuscule. Now, you got Bush pulling the United States into the Iraq War, thinking there's weapons of mass destruction. I mean, compare that to Nixon, man. Come on. And actually, Nixon had some environmental reforms, and he also wanted universal health care, which is, by today's standards, he looks kind of progressive. He also opened diplomatic relations with China, improved the US-Soviet relationships. And yes, the Watergate scandal did lead to his resignation and a constitutional crisis over the abuse of executive powers. Still, I believe he only has really 2 major flaws, and the Watergate is a big flaw. That would make him a A-tier president. Now, yes, the Watergate scandal did break government trust and showed the abuse of executive powers. You can't ignore how effective his other policies were. I believe the Watergate scandal does not overshadow everything else he done during his presidency, and I still hold firm on him being A-tier. At number 3, we have Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge was also a peacetime president. Coolidge took a hands-off government approach in the United States. Now, he is basically the opposite of Nixon because he did have constitutional humility, and he did weaken the power of the presidency, which is completely contrasted to Nixon, which it kind of makes me look like a hypocrite when I put them right next to each other, but trust me, yes, he did have labor unrest, agricultural crises, and early warning signs of financial instability. Economic theory in the 1920s was still under development. Keynesian economics did not exist. Modern monetary policy tools like the Federal Reserve's current model was not in use, and predicting economic crashes was not possible. This is why I believe Coolidge's policies must be judged within the constraints of his time, not that his policies led to the Great Depression, if it did or did not. Which is basically why most historians rank him low. Yes, he personally spoke out against the KKK, and he supported anti-lynching rhetoric. He didn't really take a substantive legislative action. They dwindled in numbers. I'm pretty sure they dwindled by 66% during his presidency. He did sign the ICA, the Indian Citizenship Act, in 1924, which granted citizenship to every single Native American born in the United States. No, he did have a lot of missed opportunities. He could have definitely pushed for more civil rights and have better long-term financial sight, which is why he isn't quite a S-tier president, but probably an A-plus president. Because he didn't really have any significant transformative policies in America. If he did push for civil rights, that could have actually probably bumped him up a tier, to be honest. This is why Coolidge is number 3 on the underrated list. At number 2, we have James K. Polk. Polk doubled the size of the US during his presidency, and he finished the annexation of Texas. He settled the Oregon Territory dispute peacefully, and led through victory in the Mexican-American War, doubling the size of the United States. This gave the U.S. lands like California, Arizona, New Mexico, etc. Now, the Mexican-American War, the main thing about James K. Polk is that it was unjustified. It was very controversial at the time, but Polk requested and received congressional approval for the war, showing that his presidency respected constitutional process. Now, James K. Polk is such a legendary figure that his 4 major goals became a legend in history. That 4 goals being resolve the Oregon boundary territory, lower tariffs, restore the independent treasury system, and last but not least, fulfilling manifest destiny. Now, I can see that his newly acquired western lands basically led to a national debate about slavery in the new states. While he was a slaveholder, he did support states' rights. There's no strong evidence that him initiating the Mexican-American War was due to the fact that he wanted slave states in the West. If we look at the 19th century political context, manifest destiny was widely accepted by Americans, although there was obviously a lot of people that opposed it, like notorious figures like Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, etc. I believe Polk's actions were not considered unusually aggressive by the standards of global imperial politics at the time. Territorial disputes and war were common tools of diplomacy in the 19th century, so you can't really blame them. And yes, the newly acquired states in the West after the Mexican-American War did help the stage for the Civil War, but if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty like that, then you could just admit the tension was already baked in the country. Because the war didn't cause divide, it literally just brought it to the surface. Slavery, power, control, those issues were already tearing things apart, so the new land just gave everyone something to fight over. You know, if we rank a president's effectiveness, James K. Polk is definitely up there. I was debating to myself whether I want James K. Polk to beat number 1 or maybe number 2, so I decided to actually put him number 2, obviously. For ranking purely based off who's the most underrated of effective president, that would be James K. Polk. James K. Polk is not really as underrated as the person at number 1, because I'm kind of ranking based off a gap, and I can see a lot of people really like James K. Polk nowadays, but historians really don't see that, but a lot of people do see that he's underrated. Historians still probably going to rank him mid-president, but a lot of people are going to rank him up like the A tier. Now, finally, at number 1, the most underrated president in the history of America is John Tyler. John Tyler pushed for the annexation of Texas in 1844 to 1845, which basically led the groundwork for the expansion that Polk does later on after his presidency, of course. The annexation was controversial, obviously. Again, led tensions over slavery and it helped trigger to the Mexican-American War. Texans, and including the Alamo defenders, had long waited to join the U.S. and the Union. He vetoed things to do with the National Bank, tariffs, which really showed presidential independence, that he didn't agree with his own party. Now, these vetoes did anger his party, which actually led to him being expelled by the Whigs. But, hey, you're the second independent president now, basically. He was a very strong supporter of Southern state rights, which is why I kind of don't think he's as good as a president as James K. Polk, and he's still kind of a bad president in that way. And he did oppose centralized federal power. Now, he did start a constitutional president. When William Henry Harrison died, the 9th president, John Tyler stood firm that he wanted to be the president of the United States. So rather than being the acting president, he immediately took the oath and became president. John Tyler did not want to be dropped from the Whigs, but they still dropped him anyway. And a president without a political party basically cripples his effectiveness. And his isolation from any party basically made him unpopular with many, and him passing policies became difficult. Now, C-SPAN's 2021 survey ranks him bottom 5 or 6. I believe people will not fully appreciate John Tyler's presidency unless an actual independent president gets elected without a party. At which point, I believe Tyler would be seen as a pioneer who faced the system alone as an independent. Now, when the Civil War broke out in 1861, John Tyler did side with the Confederates. But we're purely ranking off presidency, not what you did before or after. Now, if we did rank things like that, we would see John Quincy Adams be moved up. And his father, John Adams, would also be up there because he was literally a founding father, but his presidency did kind of suck. John Tyler had the annexation of Texas, asserted executive authority, and pioneered independent presidential leadership. And the only really achievement he has is basically Texas. I mean, there's not really anything else. I encourage you guys to comment down below who you guys think the 5 most underrated US presidents are and why. If you guys liked this video, make sure you subscribe, comment, whatever. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya. So yeah, bye.
You bring a piano out here if we can do this. We have hired about 15 Democratic violinists to fill out a concerto arrangement of this hinky-dinky song that you wrote. Would you play it for us?
Jack, let me say this. I had any future political plans to run for anything. The Republicans don't want another piano player in the White House.
Now, the honorable mentions in the video that didn't quite make it to the top 5 are Ulysses S. Grant and Benjamin Harrison.